Welcome to our You Matter Not Alone podcast. I'll be your host, Raina Moore, alongside Donna Quach today. Joining us today, we had Pan Poo, Lindsay Knapp, and Julia Thompson. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Donna.
Thank you, Leanne. So first of all, today our podcast is going to be on military sexual assault. And this podcast is with our charity, You Matter Not Alone. And so I got three special ladies with me. First is Lindsay Knapp, and she is an attorney with combat sexual assault. And she was a prior military lieutenant. And then we also have Pan over here, who is Navy. And she's still active duty right now, and she's going to talk a little bit more about her service. We got Julia. She's a veteran, and she's amazing because she's been a huge advocate for military sexual assault victims, as recent as with, advocating and protesting for Vanessa Guillen. And then we also have, another individual. His name is Enrique, and I'm going to be able to turn it over to her so that she can talk about her advocacy work, in the public shortly here. So I want to just kind of turn it over to Lindsay. Lindsay, I guess, tell us a little bit about you and what your role is with your nonprofit organization, and how are you helping military sexual assault survivors?
Sure. Thank you, Donna. So I'm an Army veteran, and I've been in the sexual assault, domestic violence arena for the last 19 years. I started off at the collegiate level, where I would train incoming freshmen at the university about all the risks and of sexual assault and resources available to them. From there, I transitioned into the military after September 11th, and there weren't really a whole lot of services for women while I was on active duty. So they didn't have a lot of those programs that they have today. So during those days, I just, as one of the few females in the unit, I just kind of handled all of those. So if anybody was assaulted or was any kind of domestic violence, they sent them to me. After I got out of the service, I transitioned into the federal civilian sector, where I actually began to work for the military's sexual harassment and assault response prevention program. And I did that for a number of years, but what I found was that a lot of my clients were experiencing retaliation and having their sexual assaults they either weren't believed and it was swept under the rug, or maybe they were just put out completely out of service for that. Also during this time, I was going to law school at night. I got my law degree. And so then from there, I transitioned into the nonprofit arena, and I stood up combat sexual assault. So what we do at Combat Sexual Assault is what we really do is we empower survivors of military sexual trauma and help them find their voice. And we help them do that through a couple of different ways. Some folks, like I said, were put out maybe on a bad conduct discharge. Let's say that they were accused of making a false statement when they were reporting their assault. Or maybe they were ordered to go work with their rapist after the assault, so then they declined to maybe, obey those orders. So then they were put out. So they'll come see us and we'll get their records updated. Then they can also get VA benefits, because a lot of them are denied veterans benefits because of that. And so it's this whole problem that kind of snowball out of control. So that's kind of what we do at Combat Sexual Assault. We really want to have the survivor help have them reclaim their voice, find their power again. And each person is very unique, and so we make a very deliberate plan for each person.
Perfect. Lindsay, I want to ask you, and I'll turn it over to Pan next, but, how do you, in terms of how do people reach out to you? How do they know about you? Let's just say they got sexually assaulted and they're still active duty, or let's just say they just got out of the military and they feel like they need to get justice.
Absolutely. So our website is combatsexualassault.org. So they can just hit our landing page, hit the contact us button. They can fill out just a short form with their name and email address, and we will reach out to them and let them know if we can help them in any kind of way.
Okay, perfect. Well, let me turn this over to you, Pan, and so Pan, I know that Lindsay is your attorney, and I'll let you kind of share a little bit about the reason why, you reach out for representation. And I know your situation just because, you're part of our campaign team. And so I'll turn it over to you, and maybe you can share your story with us.
Okay, thank you, Donna. So like you said, I'm still active duty. I'm still in the Navy. I've been in about 10 years. And let me tell you, when I first joined, I was really excited. I've done so many things. I've been given so many opportunities as far as being in the military that I'm completely grateful for. However, since my own personal experience with sexual assault, it was just traumatizing. Like the way that I was, I had to deal with it, my command climate, how when I reported it, they didn't, believe me, and there was retaliation. And even when I took the, channels and avenues to pursue my case, it was just a lot of, it took a lot of courage. So, to me, in my own experience, like the retaliation is very real. And it's even hard when you feel like you go through it by yourself. And at that time, I remember my sexual assault happened in 2017. And when I finally went public about it, it wasn't until this year and after my sister's own sexual assault and the things that she had to deal with. So, and during this time when I reached out to Lindsay, I had so many advocates that I went to and so many people that were very supportive. And she was, I know I kind of could just Google, combat sexual assault, and I read what they did, and I read Lindsay's bio, and I was like, wow, these women, like the organization, I didn't know these kind of things were available, and even though the military does have resources, it's not, how do you say it, it's just easier to get outside help. You feel a little bit safer. So that's how I met Lindsay, and and since then, I've met so many great people that are willing to help share my story. I feel safe talking to them. And, and there's so many more avenues other than just what the military can offer you. We don't have access to it still helps. It still feels empowering to have other sis talking to you, and you guys are side by side trying to let people know your story. It's even though it's kind of bittersweet, you go through something so bad, but you go through it alone, and then when you find other people, it's just amazing. Yeah.
Pen, again, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know it's always really hard. I can only imagine what it's like to be a survivor and actually have the courage to be able to, speak up. A lot of times speaking up means that there are retaliation, there are reprisal, and there are retribution. So, as a soldier, it sometimes feels a little bit safer not to say anything. So we have this movement going on right now with, since Vanessa Guillen's murder, most of the ladies are coming out, military lady survivors, and they're speaking out about it. I want to just turn it over to Julia. And, thank you again, Pan. That was really brave of you to share your story with me. But I want to turn it over to Julia because, as you know, Julia has been part of our campaign and advocating for our, the injustice of what's going on with sexual assault in the military. So, Julia, can you share a little bit more of what you've been doing in the community? I saw some of your Facebook about you speaking out on the unjust and, military sexual assault. And I just saw that, that vibration right there. It's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, ladies, for having all of us on. I think it wasn't, I got out in 2008. My sexual assault happened in 2006 when I was deployed to Iraq. And it wasn't until it really wasn't until I got out that I really felt safe, because then I could go to the police if something happened. But I also had a boyfriend at the time, and it was hard because he didn't really, he wanted to support me, I feel like, but he was also prior military. And it was like he was kind of embarrassed, not just embarrassed about what happened, but embarrassed that I was standing up and starting to talk about these things back in 2008 and telling people, the statistics, supposedly it's always changing, but is 1 in 3 women, 1 in 5 men. And people were just so blown away by that. That can't be real. But of course it's real. And I think it's because the military, we learn to suffer in silence. We learn that we don't matter. It's about the team. And if something that you're doing is detrimental to your team, it's going to affect everybody. And you can't be the person to hurt your team. When I got sent to the infantry unit, I was an interrogator in Iraq. And I mean, at 20 years old, you know, you really don't know. And I think that's a big thing that is common among a lot of these victims. It's not, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen to 40 or 50-year-olds, but it's predominantly people in their early 20s. They're younger and they're more impressionable. They're scared, and they feel like they don't have a voice. And, you know, it's like, Pan, it's that feeling right there, that choked up feeling that you cannot even know somebody and hear their story and just be like brought to emotion, brought to tears by what's going on. And I think a lot of civilians don't understand the severity of it. You know, and I had to learn how to kind of articulate what I wanted to say, but also make people understand how bad this is. And so I started telling people, you know, rape in the military isn't rape. It is rape, but it's more along the lines of incest, because the levels of betrayal and the family unit and not being able to tell somebody. And then if you do, you have to go tell your commander or your parents, and then you're still going to be around these people. When I went to Iraq, I had my own tent. I had a wooden door that I had to lock every night, you know, because the guy soldiers would try to get in. And I think that creates a sense of not only paranoia, but it just starts creating problems that shouldn't be there. You know, I shouldn't have to lock my door if I'm living at home with my dad and my brother. I shouldn't have to lock my door at night, worried that they're going to come in and violate me or take something from me. And I think a lot of women and men, what we suffer with is, you know, it's like when I was in Iraq, somebody did take something away from me in a porta potty. It happened really fast, but I also already knew about what happened to Lavina at that time. So, you know, in my mind, I was not justifying it, but just like thanking God that I didn't get beat up. I didn't get killed. And it's like, how do you know, when I told my friends about this, they're like, but why are you thinking that way? I'm like, because that's the reality. I wasn't in the Navy and I didn't get threatened to be thrown off a boat. You know, and the way that they violate and the violence that they have against a lot of women, I think it's gender fueled. You know, they don't want women doing the same thing that they're doing. If they feel like that's emasculating to them, then it is what it is. But I think it definitely in the military world, that's kind of where it happens. And I mean, like I said, I've been speaking out about this since 2008 when it wasn't, for lack of better words, popular or cool. You know, it's like it was something that I felt innately inside of me that I needed to tell people what was going on. So I was at San Diego State at the time, and all my professors, I do wear my emotions on my sleeve. So a lot of my professors gave me the go ahead to, and I was an older student, you know, I wasn't 18, 19, 20. I was already in my late 20s, you know, having my classmates ask me to buy them beer. I was like, oh my gosh, what value is this going to bring to me? You know, but my professors saw that, and they saw that there was a void in the fact that even these kids that I was sitting next to on my desk don't know what we go through and mentally how it affects us. So they let me start all my projects and really base everything around veterans and things like that. So that's kind of how I got started with panels. But when Vanessa Guillen happened, it was like something not even of me. I had to go to the streets. I had to start talking out, because a lot of the people who are going to these aren't veterans. A lot of the people who are going to these protests are people in the community who are outraged at what happened to her, not even knowing that this has been going on for so long. It was just because she was young, pretty, Hispanic, and her mom really, and her family is the one that was like, we are not going to stop. And that's really what gained the traction. But I mean, people, you know, it's like to somebody who's not affected, you know, with AIDS, they don't know the downfalls and the tragedies and the horrible details of it until you meet somebody with AIDS or you love somebody with AIDS. And then it does become a part of your life. And so I've told all my veteran friends, you know, I don't care if it's uncomfortable for you. We are the voice. And if you ever questioned in your mind why you survived through everything you survived through, it's for this moment, so that we have this moment, we have this traction right now where people, they need to be hearing it from the horse's mouth. They need to be hearing it from us, because they can read statistics. But when you see a young woman crying in pain because she was violated and somebody took something from her and she was suffering in silence, And these things, they come out in with forms of domestic violence, substance abuse, alcoholism, financial instabilities, us thinking that we don't deserve this good life because we kept our mouth shut. And when I did start talking about my rape, people are like, well, who'd you tell? Did you tell somebody? And of course I didn't at the time because I was so scared. I'm like, well, no, I didn't. And they're like, well, why? And then it's almost like they try to put the blame back on me. And it's like, because I was in another country and I couldn't just get on a plane and come home, and I really didn't even come out and tell my family till years later, because I felt like telling them was giving them something that I couldn't take back, giving them pain that I couldn't relieve. So why do they deserve that? And I think a lot of us take that brunt on ourselves. We take that burden on ourselves because we did make the choice. And I tell everybody, this is a volunteer army. Every woman who volunteers, every woman who joins is a volunteer. We're not in a draft. So we are joining for the right reasons. And so you do take that burden and that responsibility on yourself. And it does come out in other ways. People in our society are more used to women giving life, not taking life. That's why there's the ID show called Snapped. Because when a woman kills, it's like people feel like we're broken because we're going against all human nature. So it's just, I've been speaking, doing like speech meets and things like that when I was a kid. And I never knew what it was ever going to lead up to. But I also feel like me kind of dealing with my story right when I got out and advocating it for so long has kind of helped me push, kind of get my emotions to the place where they needed to be, to try to be that sounding board so people can hear us and they know really what's going on. It's very hard. We are dealing with something very traumatizing. We're very vulnerable when we come on and talk about this. We know we're going to be judged. But that's also, like I said, why I say incest and not rape, because there are no questions about incest. It's a disgusting thing. It makes you feel that bad, nasty feeling that you get. And it's like, that's what I need people to feel so that they want to change this. So that's really ultimately kind of how I got started. And, just like pushing out. My family didn't understand. But when this all happened and they started seeing now this media and these details of Vanessa Guillen, it's like, is that what you went through? Is that what you've been going through? Because they could hear it from me, but maybe to them, I'm just being a drama queen or being emotional. But now that they're seeing that this is like a huge issue, it's like more and more people are now being aware, but they also, we're telling them a problem without giving them a solution. So
yeah, and we do need to get uncomfortable in order for there to be a change. What would you tell a civilian or somebody who wants to be an activist for this movement? What can they do to help be there by your side?
I tell everybody, no matter how uncomfortable these conversations make people feel, it's like, it's hard right now because you don't want to be down, depressing people. And a lot of people, because there's so much bad stuff going on, it's like, why do I want something else bad on my plate? Well, yes, there is fires and there's coronavirus, but these are people who are volunteering to serve our country, that are bound by the law of the military system. And, it's hard because you could tell people to write your congressman. And yeah, we are doing that. We are being out in the streets. But really, I tell every single person, it starts with asking your military service member, is there something you want to talk about? Did something happen to you? Because if you ask somebody, somebody could be dealing with the most messed up thing and not wanting to say anything because they don't want to burden anybody with their problems. So if you just ask, if somebody asks you, are you okay? Are you wrong? I just had a few of my friends today for whatever reason. And I think it's because I just posted this video. I've been very raw with my emotions on the internet and putting these videos up, and people are like, are you okay? Or are you suicidal just because I talk about veteran suicide? It's like, no, I'm not. And am I getting emotional? Yes, but you should be getting emotional too. I want you to feel these feelings, But really just, I think too, getting involved with, veterans groups, it's just like gay people need straight people fighting for their cause too. We need civilians fighting for our cause just as much as we need veterans fighting for our cause. It's a community problem because when we get out of the military, we go back to these communities. And we have our vet centers, we have our VAs, but and it's hard because I haven't had a lot of success with those either. So it's really just, I think first step is like listening, asking questions, and then really going from there. And it doesn't matter, obviously, if you're a man or a woman. It is a lot of more men, I think, are not willing to talk about what happened because, unfortunately, it makes them question their sexuality, things like that. That a lot of I never dealt with that, So I think that's pretty much where it starts, going to the local, protests, the vigils, and really just showing support so that veterans don't get deterred from telling their story.
Right. Lindsay, I wanted to kind of ask you, do you feel like the military has really not protected and kept our service members safe from sexual assault? I mean, from retaliation, reprisal, and retribution?
Yeah, no, I don't think they have at all. And I love Julia. You're so amazing. You've got so much candor. I love everything about you. But I love how you use.
Wait until I show you her video. I was like, rock on, girl.
I love you, Julia.
Thank you so much.
But I love the word that you used. You used the word incest, right? And that word is so helpful in explaining this to folks, right? So the military is like a family, right? And so like if my kid gets caught smoking pot, right? Or gets a DUI, then I'm going to lay down the law, right? Like I'm going to be a good mom and I'm going to lay down that law. I'm going to do what I got to do. But if my kid gets accused of a sexual assault or a rape, that hits you different. It gives you, at the very least as a parent, it gives you a moment of pause. Whereas before you were quick. You were like, oh, you're grounded. I'm taking the car away. I'm taking the keys away. I'm flipping your room. We're doing all the things. But when you hear those other words, when you hear rape, you're like, oh. And since commanders are in charge of the judicial process, right, it's that moment of pause that I'm concerned about. Even if you've got a great commander, they are going to pause. All right, every single one of them. And if we're going to relate it to civilians and to parents, if I'm saying that to a parent, they're going to pause. They are absolutely going to pause. And so now we're asking the military to police themselves, right? And we're asking the mom or dad, right? The commander and the sergeant major are kind of like the mom and dad for the unit, right? Like they take care of all the soldiers' needs, their pay, their health, all the things, right? And if they're accused of crimes, they're going to take care of that too, right? And so, but that's not the person you want to be in charge of that investigation, right? Because they're not going to be able to remove themselves from that process. They're not going to be able to be impartial and unbiased. So one of the things that we're asking is there's some legislation being pushed with the Military Justice Improvement Act. What that would do is that would take command authority away from the prosecution of these crimes. So it'd be the commander wouldn't have any say in that process, right? So it would take mom and dad out of it. Because right now, if your kid, if you will, is accused of a crime, law enforcement will do its investigation. It'll go, let's say it just goes to, trial and a jury, they call it a panel in the military, a panel or a jury convicts the service member. The mom or the dad, the parent, the commander still gets to decide whether or not that conviction stays, right? And so there's a huge conflict there. And so again, Julia, I love how you use the word incest because it's such a great way to describe this to folks. And as we were talking about, like Julia and Pan and everyone was talking about how they experienced retaliation for reporting or even being too afraid to report, because Julia, you saw what happened to LaVonna Johnson, right? Like that was in the era of when you were serving. She was murdered in a horrific fashion. But even some of the other things that we have available for folks to report, because you're not supposed to be retaliated for reporting, right? And so if you are retaliated against, what the military will recommend is, make a complaint with the inspector general, right? And so that's what and so a lot of my clients come to see me and they're like, hey, Lindsay, we reported to the inspector general. I'm like, yeah, I bet you did. But what happens is with the inspector general is, I'll have a client who, let's say, reported to law enforcement. Law enforcement will take, let's say, 18 months to put a bow on the end of that investigation. And let's say they even get a conviction and put that person out. But if they made a complaint with the IG, I had one client, it took the IG 2 years to investigate that claim. So her claim was that the command swept it under the rug. They didn't believe her. They didn't provide her a special victims counsel. All those things, right? But during that entire time, that 2 years, she's still working for that same command that's retaliating against her, right? Only by the grace of God was this guy her rapist able to be put out of the military. But you've got this whole system set up, inspector general and blah, blah, blah. It's supposed to protect our service members, but it's not actually doing so, right? And the military knows that, right? What they're hoping, in my view, is to wear you down, right? They're going to wear you down over that process. They're going to know you're going to be in charge. You're still going to be working for that command team that's retaliating against you. right? And they're going to do all these things in hopes that it'll just go away. Because at the end of the day, they don't want to put one of their own kids, right, away for rape, because that's their kid, right? That's their family. They're not putting their family away for that. And so it's that dynamic. And I love your candor, Julia. It was great. It was a great analogy. And I took one more note, and because you did mention about men reporting, and I think that's another great thing to talk about too, as we kind of segue, particularly into civilian population, because even among civilians, we've got 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men have been sexually assaulted by the time they hit 18. So these issues that we're talking about this family dynamic, this is happening on the civilian sector as well. We're just hitting the issue first. All right. And to be fair, this is what the military always does. The military hits social issues first before everyone else, right? The military integrated African Americans into the service before everyone else. The military integrated women into the force before everyone else. So it's only, if we're being honest, the civilian population is about to hit their own revolution, if you will, and they're going to be watching how we do it. And this is how we do it. We got to take commanders out of the process. We can't have mom and dad in charge of the whole thing. Because our men who are being assaulted, 1 in 6, it takes them on average 30 years to report. 30 years. So female service members are able to report arguably a lot faster than that, right? The ones that do report generally don't take 30 years. But the men, there's such a stigma with that, and they've got so many additional barriers that they've got to overcome in order to make that report, that they just don't come forward. And there are so many more men serving in the military, so just statistically, those numbers are skyrocketed, but we just don't know it yet. So, and in my view, the men are watching the women right now. They're like, well, I see how y'all are getting treated. I ain't coming forward, right? they're like, I'm not doing that. So until the women are treated better, then that will hopefully give men more of an incentive to come forward.
Perfect. Pat, I wanted just to kind of turn over to you really quickly. I know you're active. You're still currently active right now. What kind of advice do you can you offer for these ladies and these men who are currently still active duty if they are sexually assaulted? I mean, obviously we know that there's retaliation, there's retribution, there's reprisal, and it was very brave of you to still to be able to get out of your comfort zone and, speak up about this matter. As a veteran, I think it's a lot safer. Like Julia said, once when she got out, she realized that, I need to speak up, and she felt safe afterwards. But you're still active duty. So what would you say to these, to these service members who were sexually assaulted and still continue to be serving?
When it comes to reporting sex, they say that there's 2 ways of reporting it, restricted and unrestricted. Me personally, I have a 7-year-old son, and sometimes I look at some of my, sailors, and they're like my kids too. And I would just tell them to have everything documented, have, a notebook, and write down dates, times, witnesses, everything and anything you can think of, that say this all happened before and there was some kind of harassment. Take that down and, and report it. And take that copy and make sure that it actually goes to your SARC, because there's even times where people, like in my sister Tay's case, her sexual assault was DD form 2910 was not even placed in the database, which is just wrong. Even after I sent my own inspector general report, I wish I would have told them, you guys have to reinvestigate. And I wish I would have gone to a congresswoman and man in my home state where I'm stationed at, and tell them, like, this is what's going on. And I wish I would have been a lot more proactive instead of just breaking, I kind of just gave up, and then I stayed quiet. And it wasn't until I started hearing stories about Vanessa Guillaume and everybody else and my sister that I was just sick and tired of hearing these kind of stories happen to people. It's just not okay. And I think that if anything really helped, it's just that people sharing their stories is what really empowered me. So, that would be my advice, is to take note of everything and don't let nobody, get in your way, and just tell your story, because what can they do? right? Like they can try to make you feel uncomfortable. They can say all these things about you, but if you know, on God's green earth that you're telling the truth, and just stick by that, stick by God, and and it doesn't matter what the naysayers say. So yeah, that's my advice for anyone that's still active duty, or facing retaliation, that you just stick to God, and stick to your guns, and stick to people that support you, and that's it. You just got to choose not to be afraid. And even though it is really scary, sometimes you feel like you're by yourself, but you're really not alone. There's so many people that go through this. It's just crazy, but I know that there's strength in numbers, and there's strength in finding others, and that's really what helped me through my own personal situation, is just reaching out to people, because before I would have just stayed quiet, and it was just depressing. I think it happened in 2017. For 3 years, just about 3 years, I was miserable and angry, but I'm able to find. I'm just able to share my story, as sad as it may be, just to share with people, and to publicly lay it out, other than just keeping it inside, has been so empowering.
How has it been to work with Lindsay, Pan, and how empowered do you feel being with somebody that's been in the military and that has your back?
Oh, yeah. So the first conversation I had with Lindsay, it was just like we clicked. Like, it was just like everything just, I just felt like she was like finishing sentences. She got me, and it's crazy because she does have our back, she understands. And it's so amazing just to have somebody that can just understand. And you don't even have to finish your whole story. She just believes you. She believes you, and that's empowering. So yeah, working with Lindsay and working with so many of my other sisters that, can understand me, it has been very, very, it's a blessing.
And Lindsay, how's this experience been for you? And I know that there's going to be an ABC interview in October. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, well, I guess, for me, we're not always able to get justice, right? For a lot of our folks. And so that's not actually my mission, right? My mission is to empower people, right? I've already been through the fire. I get, like Pan said, I got you. I get it. I get every bit of it. And I know it hurts right now, and the fire, it burns, but I'm going to walk you to that other side. I'm going to take you by the hand, and we're going to go. And what you're going to find is you're going to find your voice. You're going to realize that you are stronger than you ever could have imagined. And that's really that. And that's our mission, right? And that's what we're going to try to do. And we're going to try to do it through all these things, right? We're going to try to get you some justice with VA or the Board of Military Corrections or with your unit and all those things. But at the end of the day, it's about you. And the more people we can mobilize and help them find their voice, because they've lost that, right? They may be carrying around some shame, right? They may think it's their fault, right? Or they weren't believed, so maybe they don't think they're important. So they may have some depression or anxiety. But that's okay, right? It's all part of the process. We are going to lean into that. So part of the piece CBS is doing is they're talking to people like me who are kind of doing this work or have experienced retaliation for helping others, and they're talking to some survivors' families. So hopefully we're able to add a little bit more momentum to this movement. And at least in my view, I think we're adding a ton of momentum, and I feel like our time is now. And if you're ever wondering about if this is the time to reclaim your voice, it's now. I promise you, it's now. I know you're scared, and I know it's hard, and it feels daunting, and it is all of those things. It is absolutely all of those things. But you are going to feel so much better once you dig through all of that dirt. Because even flowers grow out of dirt, right? You never know what's going to come up, and we're going to be there for you the whole step of the way. So we got you.
Absolutely. And I just want to kind of piggyback off of Leanne's question. Our organization, You Matter Not Alone, we're also sponsoring a campaign too as well. It's called A Vet's New Era. And Julia and Pan is also part of that too. And my hope and my goal for these survivors is to be able to have their voice and to be heard, and to be able to, go on to different podcasts and attend different rallies and to speak up and to let other people know that it's okay. It's okay to share your story. It's okay to have this conversation that you were raped in the military. And to come up with a solution together so our next generation does not go through what we've gone through, and to make the military safe for all service members.
And to hold the military accountable, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We are running to an end of our podcast. And usually, I'll turn it over to Leanne because we like to kind of do a 30-second gratitude prayer.
Yes, I just want to take a minute of your time and just, think of something that you're grateful for today. And we're going to just leave a minute of silence. I know I'm grateful for all of you guys today, for being here, being so strong to share your stories, your personal ones, and for causing change in a world that needs it. So I appreciate you all, and that's my gratitude today. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and keep going because we need you.
Thank you.
Thank you.